Okay, we got Facebook over here. We got Instagram over here. I think we're good with everything. What is up, PT on Ice crew? I am Dr. Mark Lant, lead faculty with the Ice Extremity Division, alongside Lindsay Huey and Eric Chacones, coming at you today, Clinical Tuesday. Just quick housekeeping, not a lot of courses to report coming up here over the next couple weeks. We're getting to that time of year where holidays are upon us. Time to reflect on what went down in 2021, start to mend the nets for 2022, and then get back out there on the road. But I would highly recommend if there's an ice course that you're looking to take, or you've been thinking about it, go ahead and go on the website and sign up. It seems like the days of when you could sign up for an ice course last minute and hop on a plane and kind of go by the seat of your pants, those days seem to be behind us. We are selling out quite a few courses and have waiting lists for courses. So if there's an online course you were looking to take that you haven't jumped into yet, or if there's a live one that you've got your eye on in the winter of 2022 or spring of 2022, I highly recommend jumping on there right now. So what I want to talk about today is the shoulder pathology of the extra-articular shoulder, what sometimes we've called the weak shoulder, rotator cuff tendinopathy, subacromial impingement syndrome. It's gone by a lot of different names over the last handful of years, but really it's these pathologies that are based on the extra-articular, the soft tissues, the tendons, the muscles around the shoulder. Before we dive into that, I want to bring your attention back to last Clinical Tuesday, last week with Justin Dunaway. If you haven't listened to Justin Dunaway's podcast from last Tuesday morning, I would highly recommend when you finish this one, go ahead and download that one and dial it up. What he was talking about was social contagion. So again, we're not talking about viruses, we're not talking about COVID. We are talking about how we as human beings are contagious. And with this idea that We've all heard this a bunch of times before, of that you're a combination of the 5 people that you hang out with the most, which is probably true. But what is also true about that is you are significantly influencing all the individuals who you surround. Everyone that you come into contact with your life, especially on a consistent basis, is going to be influenced by your actions, your thoughts, your beliefs. And that is definitely true for our patients. But when you dive into this research, what's really cool that starts to show up is that it's not just the things you say. It's not just the things you do, but it's how you do them. If you don't actually believe in the things you're saying or actually believe in the things that you're doing, those that come in contact with you, our patients and our clients, they're going to pick up on subtle cues in your facial expressions, right? How you hold your posture. Our body language gives so much information on that's going to bombard the person's nervous system, whether they realize it or not. And that's why it's so important that as physical therapists, trainers, coaches, that we actually believe what we're doing. This brings us back to another topic that used to get discussed on this podcast all the time, especially back in the days when Jeff Moore was screaming at this thing on but like before it was even on Instagram and Facebook, when it was still Periscope. The idea of Simon Sinek's start with why, right? If we don't know why we're doing our specific interventions, the things that we're doing in clinic, then there's no way the patient is going to believe them, because we probably aren't so sure that we actually believe them if we didn't start with why. So what I want to do today is go through the why of that we choose very specific interventions early on for this rotator cuff tendinopathy type presentation. So what we have is a bunch of research from Jeremy Lewis, Chris Littlewood over the last handful of years that shows that resistance training is going to be our primary intervention when we're dealing with that rotator cuff tendinopathy or subacromial impingement syndrome. But it's not just because we want to increase the tensile load of the soft tissues and tendons in there. Don't get me wrong, that's super important. But what we see with resistance training is it's the entire package, right? We get that tensile load, but we also were allowing the patient to have a lot of self-efficacy. When they lift 1 pound one day and then 2 weeks later they're lifting 5 pounds, it gives them that nice sensation of like, look at me, I'm doing better, look at what I can do. But we're also getting a lot of cortex influence, increasing motor excitability, decreasing cortical inhibition. We're reshaping that somatosensory cortex with the homunculus. We're getting all sorts of fluid exchange from an inflammatory component. So there's just a wide variety of ways and reasons that resistance training is so important. Don't just look at it from a tensile load perspective. Well, which resistance exercises do we think are the best for this subacromial impingement rotator cuff tendinopathy? Well, the first exercise we like to go to is side-lying external rotation. So just having that patient lie on the opposite shoulder, getting them on their side, getting the dumbbell in their hand, as heavy as they can tolerate for around 10 reps, and letting them go to town. Right. With this exercise, the reason we choose it, the why of why we choose it, is because we have studies going back to Mike Reinhold, JOSPT 2004, showing that you get a really, really high EMG amplitude for the posterior cuff, for the infraspinatus, for the teres minor, when you do that side-lying external rotation. Besides that, besides having a nice output, what you're also getting in this situation is it's fairly non-threatening, it's fairly non-aggressive to the anterior shoulder, which is usually typically sensitized. So all of those bursa, you've got the inferior glenohumeral ligament, the coracohumeral ligament, all of these structures that can be really irritable while going overhead are not going to be irritated when you're doing side-lying external rotation. So again, we have this combination of high EMG output based on Reinhold 2004 and a bunch of studies afterwards, and knowing that that neutral abduction is a really nice non-threatening position for the patient, not getting all those anterior structures irritated. So that's the why of why we choose the side-lying external rotation as one of our first go-to exercises. The other exercise we really like, or one of the other exercises we really like, is the wall slide, or the serratus wall slide. So that patient's going to get their forearms up against either a wall or a foam roller. They're going to strap a band around their forearms, try to keep those things parallel, and slide their arms up the wall. The reason we like this a lot is because the serratus anterior, with its ability to upwardly rotate the scapula and protract the scapula, is going to be super important for these subacromial impingement rotator cuff tendinopathy patients. They often have pain going overhead, so if we can get that scapula working in concert with all the other muscles to really upwardly rotate, plus getting the extra added benefit of the band is going to provide some stimulus to the posterior cuff in a different position, it's a really, really nice double whammy. We've got Dustin Hardwick, JOSPT 2006, who gives us probably the most robust study on that specific exercise. So if you wanted to check that out, again, it's Dustin Hardwick, 2006 JOSPT. Getting a little older now, but definitely a good one to check out. And you might be thinking, well, if you just said that side-lying external rotation can be a nice exercise because we're not getting that shoulder going overhead and it's not irritable to the anterior structure of the shoulder, why would you do a wall slide overhead? Well, what we see is because the wall slide, because the forearm and the elbow are against the wall or against the foam roller, it has this kind of sensation of almost being a closed chain exercise, which can be really nice for the individual. So that activation of the cuff, that kind of pseudo closed chain exercise with the short lever arm, so they're only got the humerus going, it can be super nice for the patient, and what we find is people tolerate it exceptionally well. So we got side-lying external rotation. Our why there is high EMG output to the posterior cuff and non-irritable to the shoulder. We've got the serratus wall slide. Our why there is it's getting all of the scapular upward rotators and protractors going, which is super important for overhead, and it gets them starting to go overhead in an exercise that tends to be very well tolerated for most of our patients. The final piece is the landmine press. So typically with these rotator cuff tendinopathies, subacromial impingement patients, going overhead or reaching overhead is their problem. And with a lot of individuals as they go through life, we start to lose robustness and resilience going into an overhead position. So that's really the one that we want to train back. And it's just such a functional exercise and position to have in life. Getting the thoracic spine going, getting all of the muscles surrounding the shoulder is really, really nice for that overhead press. Well, early on, our rotator cuff tendinopathies or subacromial impingement pain patients, they may not be able to tolerate going into that pure overhead press. So the landmine press is going to be our go-to. You can get a lot of stimulus through that overall shoulder without going all the way overhead, and you can modify that to whatever level of press on that landmine the individual can do as far as a shoulder flexion height. The other really nice thing about the landmine press is that you can load this really heavy. So again, building that self-efficacy. Look, Ann, you could only do the barbell day one doing this landmine press. Now we have 90 pounds on there. I think we're probably ready to start inching towards going overhead. How powerful is that when you're looking at that with your patients? So again, sideline external rotation, wall slide, landmine press. Know why you're doing each of them with your patient, and it becomes much more believable. You are contagious. You have to believe in your exercises so that all of your body language, your facial expressions, your eyes demonstrate to your patients that you do actually believe in the things that you're giving them. All right, we'd love to hear questions in the comments. If you want to hear more about rotator cuff tendinopathy, I'm going to be on Vice tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern, talking about all things, how we assess for rotator cuff tendinopathy, how we treat rotator cuff tendinopathy, our favorite exercises, our favorite manual interventions. It's going to be a blast for an hour. All right, go out and crush it in clinic today. Hope to see you all on the road soon. If I don't get on here before the next couple months, happy holidays to everyone.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.